Yeah, CPL. It's the watch party hosted by Minnie and Mariah. Mariah needs a stage name, I'm suggesting. What do you know what? Send us your suggestions for Mariah's stage name to 876-564-7661. That's our WhatsApp number. The Fan Zone, the SportsMax Fan Zone virtual party hosted by Mariah and Minnie. Minnie is her performance name. Her government name is Michaela Brown. Thank you very much. So that number down there at the bottom of your screen, send a suggested stage name, a performance name for Mariah Ramarat, because Mariah can't be used for such a setting. So give us your suggestions and we'll put them up in graphics on the screen of the SportsMax Zone for you.
Such a setting, George? What do you mean by that?
Such a setting is different from this setting. Don't you agree?
But that is, listen, it was the first time I'd done something like that, so it was like very different for me. I think we'll stick with Mariah.
That doesn't obviate the need for you to get a stage name.
Are you saying that I act differently when I'm on that fan zone as to when I'm here?
I would be very surprised if you did not act different, because that role requires you to be something different.
Oh my.
And there's Minnie there as well, so, and Minnie is not really Minnie.
No, but that's
so Mariah shouldn't be Mariah.
That's the point I'm making.
Mariah is Mariah, viewers, and you all are going to send those voice notes and say that.
Please send the suggestions, all right? Texts or voice note, we want to hear. What is the Ramarak stage name? What name do you want her to use for the rest of the CPL watch party, yeah? Tell us, all right. Cricket now. The preliminary round of the Hero CPL ended on Sunday with St. Lucia's Zouks beating Jamaica Tallawahs by 11 runs at Brian Lara Cricket Academy in Tarouba. The Zouks batted first. They posted 145 for 6 from 20 overs. The Afghan, Najibullah Zadran, top scored at 35. His countryman, Mujib-ur-Rahman, took 2 for 28. The Tallawahs were cruising at 84 without loss, but collapsed. They ended on 134 for 9. Jamaica's Javel Glenn picked up 3 for 16. Final scores, Zouks 145 for 6, Tallawahs 134 for 9. In the early match on Sunday, Trinbago Knight Riders preserved their 100% win record. They beat St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots by 9 wickets. Oh my goodness. The Patriots batted first and were skittled out for 77, with Fawad Ahmed taking 4 for 21. The Knight Riders, they raced 78 for 1, winning with 51 balls to spare. Wow. Scores of the match, the Patriots 77, the Knight Riders 78 for 1. So after 30 matches in the preliminary round, this is how the teams finished. So the Qs say it all. 20 points for the Knight Riders. How impressive is that? Amazon Warriors, they played badly in the first 4 or 5 games, but then they got it together, finished strongly to finish second. The Zouks, Darren Sammy, looks as if he's on course for something special this year with them Zouks. And the Tallawahs finished 4th, not because they're any good, but because the Tridents and the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots were awful this season. And there is nothing, though, to suggest that the Tallawahs can't go from strength to strength and win the competition. We've seen that before. 4th place to get into the semis is no indicator of how you will play in the semis. So the Tallawahs are in it. They have at least a puncher's chance. Well, the Tallawahs, they play the Trinbago Knight Riders in semi-final 1, while the Zouks battle Guyana Amazon Warriors in semi-final 2. Both these matches will be live on SportsMax. They have the times. The Tallawahs Knight Riders, yes, 9 a.m. on Tuesday, 10 in the Eastern Caribbean on SportsMax. And then Warriors and Zouks Tuesday, 4:30 p.m., 5:30 p.m. ECT, also on SportsMax. And check out Mariah. She will be hosting the virtual watch party. Minnie will also be in on the act. By this time tomorrow, Mariah would have been well into using her new stage name for this virtual party. You can log in at sportsmax.tv/CPL 2020 and enjoy the entertainment. You can win a cash prize if you're part of the virtual watch party. $500 for being the fan of the match. There are also credit giveaways courtesy of Digicel. And here's what, I hope I'm not breaking any rules by doing this. If the name that you have suggested for Mariah to use as her stage name gets chosen by the zone panel, you will win a cash prize as well. So I hope our CEO is watching this. He can go into his pocketbook and write something on a check leaf that is authentic.
Ali.
Yeah, so a cash prize for the name chosen for Mariah's stage name for the virtual watch party. Can we crack on? Tallawahs opening batsman Glenn Phillips, he topped the run scoring chart in the preliminary round. He had 314 runs from his 10 games, finishing in front of Hetmeyer, Bravo, Evan Lewis and Nicholas Puran, a quartet of West Indies players below Glenn Phillips. What about the bowlers? It was another Tallawah, Mujib-ur-Rahman, 15 wickets from them 10 games. Well, finished level with Imran Tahir, the greying Imran Tahir, but no less potent. And then good to see Kesrick Williams on this leaderboard. as well in 4th place with his 13 wickets from 10 games. What about the sixes? Who hit the most sixes? Polly, as Lance likes to call him, Kyron Pollard, 20 sent over the boundary in the air. Glenn Phillips wasn't far behind. Evan Lewis finished in 3rd on 18. Andre Russell, 16 sixes. And D.M. Bravo, 14 sixes from the games he played in. Well, we just spoke about batting, and lead selector for Cricket West Indies, Roger Harper, says, you know what, he's disappointed with the performance of these CPL batsmen and their failure to adjust. The tournament has been plagued by poor batting and low scores. Speaking on the popular Mason and Guest show on VOB Radio in Barbados, Harper said he had hoped to see sensible batting from the players. This is what he said. I think that, yes, we expected to have some better cricket. I think at times a lot of power play was put in and not enough brain play. We are happy to have some cricket, but yes, we expected to have some better performances generally, particularly on the batting side of things. Ideally, you would like to have pitches more conducive to stroke play from the get-go. But the batsmen that have generally succeeded have adapted very well. They have given themselves some time to get in and then capitalized later. Some players have not gotten that memo as yet. Some teams are still trying to score all the runs up front when all the runs are scored at the back end, said the former Guyanese all-rounder. Well, this year's CPL has seen teams score an average of 29 runs less when compared to the 2020 edition. This simple display. So, in 2020, the average innings total, 122 runs. The average innings total in 2019, 151. That's the difference right there down in red. And then completed innings, let's look at those. 5 team totals less than 100 in this year's tournament. The Tridents, guilty twice. The Zooks, the Patriots, well, the Tridents guilty 3 times. 3 times they failed to. That's an indictment on the quality of the performance of the batting by the defending champions, we remind you. The Zooks once, the Patriots once, and 1 team total less than 100 in all of 2019. Can you imagine? The Tallawahs, 79 against the Amazon Warriors. I remember that game in 2019. Now, no team cracked the 200-run mark in this year's CPL. No team scoring at over 200 or more. That's compared to 8 totals of 200 or more in 2019. The Amazon Warriors did it. 2 big scores there against the Tallawahs and the Tridents. The Patriots, 242. They went berserk against the Tallawahs. The Tallawahs, they 240. Oh, that game against the Tallawahs and the Patriots was one to live long in the memory. I'm sure Ransford Ricketts has that on his highlight package to show when the CPL is in off-season. And then 267, the Trinbago Knight Riders absolutely flayed the Tallawahs bowling last year for 267 runs. And amazingly, when you look at that, no team passing 200 this year. So, for some insight and a perspective as to why and how, we've turned to the ace numbers man in this part of the world, not just in the Caribbean, but in the Western Hemisphere, I'm suggesting. Zaheer Clarke, who spoke to us during those ultimate selections, Test, ODI, and T20. He joins us to double down on the numbers registered in this year's CPL as we seek to look at the trends which paint the picture of how poor the batting was in this year's preliminary stage. Zaheer, welcome to the SportsMax Zone, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, George and Lance and Mario, and your listeners as well.
0 scores above 200, Zaheer Clarke, relative to 8 scores above 200 in 2019. What the devil has gone wrong with the batting and the batsmen from a numbers perspective, my friend?
Well, there are a lot of things to consider when we look at what contributed to the scores that we saw this year. For one, as we saw, the 30 matches played in the preliminary round, 20 of them were played at the Brian Lara Stadium and 10 of them at the Queen's Park Oval. The first 10 at the Brian Lara, then the next 10 at Queen's Park Oval, and the last 10 back at the Brian Lara Stadium. But what we have seen is that, for me, playing so many matches on these pitches, these grounds usually have around 2 to 3 strips that you usually work with and rotate. And for playing so many matches on them in such a short period of time, there was some wear on the pitches. That was one contributing factor. Also, a lot of the teams went for more spinners. Early on in the tournament, we saw some high scores in the first 10 matches. But after that, with more and more teams moving away from pacers and becoming more spin heavy, we know that West Indies batsmen, on a whole, usually have difficulty negotiating spinners. And as I had said in the Ultimate 11, you can't have too many spinners in your team. So those are two factors, and there are others that we can look at that contributed to the low scores this season.
Just keeping just looking at the overall picture before we drill down into the numbers. Are you saying? Well, I'm not certain how many strips were used at each of the two grounds you mentioned that the games were played at. But what we can say for sure is that under normal circumstances in the CPL, each ground would have maybe 2 or 3 strips that would be used, and then those strips would only be used for a maximum of 5 games. So we're talking about pitches and strips, well, grounds and strips that have been overworked in this year's CPL, which you're suggesting may account for the difficulties, the struggles that some of the batsmen had in compiling scores in this year's tournament.
Yeah, that's a contributing factor. And it also boils down to the batsmen applying themselves and negotiating the situation that is in front of them. Because of the COVID-19, we had to restrict the number of venues that we had to play. And if you look, for example, in the first 10 matches or so, the teams are averaging 140 in terms of their inning scores. But when they came back after going to Queen's Park Oval, we saw the number of runs per innings coming down to, I think, around 123. But the Queen's Park Oval was a big anomaly. The run scoring there was much lower than at the Brian Lara Stadium, for sure.
All right.
That's also contributed to the numbers that we're looking at.
Right. So let's start the comparison there, because I was going to ask you to compare the scores at intervals for the games played at QPO as opposed to Brian Lara. And I'm talking about, if you have it like that, at 5, 10, 15, and of course at the finish. Those 4 intervals, the scores for the teams that used those facilities during the course of the preliminary round.
Well, I don't have for all of the intervals. I looked at the overall score. The over by over analysis, I haven't finished compiling it.
No problem. So give us what you have, yeah.
Yeah, so what I was saying, that for the first 10 matches, the average scores that we saw was like 140 runs per inning. But when we went to the Brian Lara Stadium, that came down to 120 thereabout. And we had 1 and 2 matches that had no results, and we had some that affected by rain. But the rain also played a factor, because a lot of rain fell in the latter half of the tournament for a couple of days, and that also slowed down the pitches. But for match 21 to match 30, when they went back to the Brian Lara, it was like a 17-run difference compared to when they were there initially. So the wear of the pitches, we can see. For the first 10 matches, we had a lot of big scores. TKR made a lot of scores above 150, 160, 170. But when we went back there for the last 10 matches, the scores came back down.
Zaheer, I'm glad you mentioned TKR made a lot of big scores, because would you see irresponsible batting as a factor? I mean, it's so easy for us to say the pitches, the rain, everything else, but there were many players that got starts, they got big scores. What about the others?
Yeah, as I hinted at, the batsmen needed to apply themselves and adjust. And I think the TKR team on a whole, if you look at that team with Simmons, Monroe, Bravo, Pollard, and even Narayan coming at the top, they are usually better batsmen of spin. And as we saw with them, they don't give away their wickets early. They might lose the first wicket in the first 4 or so overs, but they don't lose their second wicket on average, until over number 8. While most of the other teams are losing 2 wickets, sometimes even 3 wickets in the power play in the first 6 overs. And so what they have done is they have pushed that batting lineup further and further and further down into the overs, so that they can maximize the amount of runs. And an interesting note about the TKR team also is that even when wickets lose, we don't see a tapering off of the run rate in terms of how fast they're scoring. They are scoring on average over 7 runs, sometimes 7.5 runs and over. And even when wickets fall, they don't drop off. While the other teams, we see some of them struggling as the wickets, they lose those wickets.
We've assessed the decline in the batting statistics coming from 2019 to 2020, Zaheer. A lot of the players came into the series match rusty, without, continuous game practice coming in for several months because of the COVID-19. Could this be a factor as well?
Yeah, for sure. Nobody has been playing a lot of cricket since the outbreak in February, March, thereabouts. Even our local season that was going on had to stop then. And no cricket was played until just recently. A few other guys got an opportunity to go to England to play Test cricket, but that's a whole different format compared to what we are seeing here. A lot of the teams I saw where they went a lot for bowling, all-rounding, bowling all-rounders and stuff. And a lot of them focused a lot on the bowling and getting those slow bowlers. But a lot of them, those teams, they did not have quality batsmen that could also negotiate those slow bowlers. So that's, I think, contributed a lot to the low scores that we are seeing here.
Yeah. Was the bowling that good?
It's a good question. Yeah, we had some quality bowlers. Off the top of our heads, we can talk about Narayan, Rashid. We saw how Mujib did. Satna did well as well, and stuff. So the spinners have been doing well. Who has not done well is the fast bowlers. Even if you look at the top 10 bowlers who have conceded the most runs in an inning for this, only one spinner, I think, featured in that top 10 in any innings, and that was when Pollard tore Walsh to shreds in that Trident's TKR match. So the pace bowlers, if you go after the pace bowlers, you get runs. I think there's almost a 2 runs difference when we looked at it halfway. When we're looking at the stats halfway through the tournament after 15 matches. The slow bowlers were going at 6 and over, while the fast bowlers were going around 8 and over. But for me, the bowling is good, but the bowling has been good, but the batsman needs to lift their game, and that has been the problem with West Indies cricket. Spinners dominate first-class cricket. Spinners dominate the ODI List A cricket, and we are seeing them dominating here in the CPL.
Have you yet distilled the numbers to be able to answer the question? The average opening partnership in this year's tournament, how does that stack up relative to, say, 2019?
I haven't gotten a chance to go back and look at the 2019 stats. I've been busy doing a lot of stuff, but the opening partnership that we are seeing here, when we look at teams overall, the opening partnership is giving you around 19 runs on the board. By the time teams lose their second wicket, it's around 40 runs on the board or thereabouts. So on average, the first 3 or 4 wickets give you at least 20 runs per wicket. But after that, going down, it's diminishing returns, especially after the first 5 wickets. You're not getting a lot from the lower order batsmen.
And that wouldn't be true of teams like the Patriots and the Patriots and the Tridents, beg your pardon. That wouldn't be true because if you the average, and of course they've been way below average, so that wouldn't be true of them.
And also the Tala was in those matches when Russell was not playing as well.
Yeah. So you're saying then, I wanted to just put a cap on this in the minute we have left. The batting, no doubt, is poorer this year relative to last year as the immediate point of reference. But the great thing to consider is that the conditions of this year's CPL have been different from every CPL we've had before, and the quality of the strip and the wear and tear and the failure to adjust by the batsmen accounts largely for the poor outturn we've seen of the batsmen. That's the overall summation you'd make on this year's tournament in terms of batting.
And the big difference between the QPO, the Queen's Park Oval pitch and the Brian Lara Stadium pitches.
Absolutely so. All right, we hope to speak with you again when you are finished with the numbers. We know that there's a lot going on. We thank you for your time nonetheless, and we hope to talk again soon.
Yeah, man, cool.
Good. Zaheer Clarke there talking to us about the CPL from a batting perspective. No score above 200 so far this year. There's still some way to go in the tournament, not a far way to go, but there's still a chance for teams to rack up the big scores. A reminder that there was a 262 put on by TKR last year. Nobody came close to 200 this year.
185.
And that's been, 185 is the high water mark this year. And by past TPL standards, it has been poor, but there have been a lot of countervailing issues which could have contributed to the poor outturn of individual batsmen and, of course, team totals. Break, back with more.